Welcome back to Banjo Strings and Drinking Gourds, How America Culture Came to Be, the podcast of the Frontier Culture Museum of Virginia. I'm Alex.
And I'm Rachel. Today we're going to delve into just what exactly is living history and what do we mean when we say interpretation.
Living history is fairly self-explanatory. At its most basic, it means simply that people reproduce past activities or bring history to life. When you see people harvesting flax with a reaper hook, cooking over a fire, or even playing music of a certain period on period instruments, that's living history.
You may have been to a living history museum, such as the FCM, Colonial Williamsburg, Conner Prairie Museum, or Old Sturbridge Village, to name just a fraction of the museums just in the US. A living history museum doesn't have to be as large as those, however. There are quite a number of museums that showcase a specific house or farm that has historical significance to a specific area.
Living history museums have been around for a long time. Most people point to Sweden for the earliest example, all the way back to the end of the 19th century. The idea of presenting an aspect of history for a more immersive experience than a more typical display of artifacts behind glass took off. Now you can find living history museums around the world.
I've found it's a great way to engage in local history when traveling. It's also kind of a cultural leveling tool when you see people in, say, Europe interpreting pre industrial farming in pretty much the same way we do here. That part of the human experience is ubiquitous, and living history is so often agrarian based, given that the majority of the population throughout history were farmers.
Now, interpretation, on the other hand, is harder to unpack. The people bringing the past to life are often called interpreters, quite simply because they are literally interpreting the past in the present. But there are guidelines to follow. Believe it or not, in the 1950s, Freeman Tilden, who worked for the National Park Service, drafted an instructional manual called Interpreting Our History. We still use it today. It was especially progressive for the time period by instructing that you can interpret to children the same way you would adults, and as well as insisting on context that information in a vacuum was an interpretation.
And even finding that information to integrate into interpretation has guidelines. A majority of historical interpreters, I think, do a lot of their own research or help compile the interpretive plan or narrative for sites. And that involves not just reading books written by historians, but going to the source, looking at first person sources, primary sources, like diaries, newspapers, or maps. It can be very time consuming, and we're constantly peer reviewing each other. It's pretty much like having a fact checker on 24/7. And woe betide someone who hasn't followed up on an angle someone else has thought of.
Occasionally, people do get passionate about their niches, and interpreters, while typically having to be generalists, also find their own little areas of interest or specialization. That's where collaborative comes in, using as much knowledge as you can find in the people around you to make a new program go well or to prepare for a specific tour group.
Speaking of collaboration, today we thought we'd introduce you to some of the talented interpreters we have here at the Frontier Culture Museum, and let them tell you a little bit more about just what interpretation is. To start off, we'll ask how some of them got started in interpretation.
Hi, I'm Sally, and I've been here at the Frontier Culture Museum for 19 years. So, how did I get started in interpretation? Well, I've always liked history since I first went to Gettysburg in fifth grade. Then I wrote a classic paper, What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? A few years later. I wanted to be a social studies teacher. When it came to college, I was discouraged from majoring in history, so I majored in recreation and parks and elementary education. I started a second career at the Frontier Culture Museum using my education degree as a tour guide for school groups. 6 months later, we interviewed again, and I was asked, what would I like to be, a tour guide or an interpreter? I quickly responded, an interpreter, in order to engage more in history. In summary, yes, I did get to be a social studies teacher for many school groups coming through the Frontier Culture Museum. None of our experiences are ever in vain, and hang on to your dreams and passions.
My name is Jean-Claude Hatungimana. I am originally from Burundi in East Africa. Moved to the US 2011. When I moved in here, I didn't know what I'll be doing here. So a day I was driving around, passed by the museum, and there's some mud structures here. I was saying, what? Here in the US, mud structure? Then I decided it was July 4th, 2012, so I came to visit. I didn't know it was a free admission. I saw people going in, but I was terrified. I couldn't make it. I turned around and left. Then a few days after, a lady from my church told me about this museum. I said, you need to go and apply for a job. So she brought me here and brought my resume. Then I got a call the same month, July 31st, 2012. And that's how I got this job. So I've been here 8 years. I started as a part-time 4 years. Then I've been like 4 years as a full-time employee. And I did communication back home, so this is perfect for me. So I've been here as an interpreter since then.
My name is Emily. I have been working here at the Frontier Culture Museum for about 5 years now. I actually have a background in art history. I went to school up in Pennsylvania for my undergraduate, and then I also went for a post-baccalaureate year over in Florence, Italy, doing some art conservation and restoration and working on all sorts of different materials. So once I came back from all of that, I was looking specifically for a museum job. Now, this place has amazing old structures, so that made my little heart flutter because I was thinking, oh, great, I still get to work with these historic materials like what I'd done in school. Then I come do my interview, and it all went very well. I actually grew up coming here as a kid. I went to camp here back when the 1850s house was where West Africa was. My parents used to literally march me around so that I would take a nap in the car on the way home. But what I found to be really interesting is that as soon as you start doing interpretation here, especially, you get to dive in very quickly. So I started out as a part-timer, mostly working in England first. So the first time I ever got to wear a set of stays, or a corset, if you are more familiar with that term. And it was the middle of a hot summer, and I learned very quickly to drink a lot of ice water. But interpretation became something for me that went far and beyond what I ever thought it would. So not only is it fun to experience all of these different types of people, but you also get to have these real connections through the love of history as well as just loving our museum.
That's great, guys. Thanks. At the Frontier Culture Museum, we have a junior interpreter program called the John Lewis Society, after the founder of Stanton. Junior interpreters are so important because not only are we introducing living history to kids, but the kids themselves add an incredibly important facet to our interpretation about childhood in the past. Personally, I attended summer camp at the Long Lake Prairie Museum in Minnesota, and I have great memories of running around in my bonnet and dress barefoot, either playing games like hoop and stick and failing miserably at it, or making lye soap, but also talking to visitors about why kids would be doing what we were.
The John Lewis Society has been going on strong at the museum for over 20 years. The biggest year we had 56 members, and they were all girls. This year, because of COVID, we are on a break. Hopefully next year, the John Lewis members will be back at the museum. Our John Lewis participants are 12 to 15 years of age and spend at least 2 days a month, often many more, at the museum from spring through fall. They actively engage with visitors, attend workshops on various aspects of history, and hopefully have a good time. We have a couple of recent John Lewis members here. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves, some of your favorite things you did at the museum, and how it was interpreted to adults and young teenagers?
We have a couple of recent John Lewis members here. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves, say some of your favorite things you did at the museum, and how was it interpreted to adults and young teenagers?
Hi, I'm Ben. I worked at the museum for 2 years, and before that, I was part of the summer camp. For both of those years, I worked at England, and I really enjoyed it there. I liked interpreting and talking about what it would have been like to live back then.
What was the favorite thing you did at the museum?
Probably the woodworking.
Did you have something that it was your favorite that you made?
Yeah, I really liked helping make the fence, and it's still up, so I can still, whenever I go back there, I think about when I made it.
All right, good. And I'm glad the fence is still standing. How was it interpreting to people of your own age?
It was fine. I didn't really see a problem with that. Like, I could still teach them, and it wasn't a big deal.
Was there a difference between when you first started and when you ended it? Did it become easier interpreting to people?
Yes, I've gotten so much better at public speaking and just, speaking overall by interpreting. It really helped.
Excellent. And now we have?
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I was also at John Lewis for 2 years, and I did summer camp as well. So I've been here for a couple of years. I really loved working on the 1820s farm, which I stayed on for both years. I really enjoyed cooking and baking and helping with the livestock.
And what was your favorite thing you did in 1820s?
Well, cooking and baking, and then, of course, talking to people.
All right. And how was it talking to adults?
It was interesting. There were some exciting people, which I hold in my heart. But it was cool because I got to share information that they didn't know themselves. So.
All right. And my other question, Ben, how was it wearing the costumes of the time period?
It had its moments. During the summer, it was pretty hot, but during the winter, it wasn't too bad.
All right. And Charlotte, how was it wearing all the clothes you had to wear?
It was definitely hot, as Ben said. Winter was a lot better. But I really enjoyed it because, I felt like I was living in 1820. So.
And did working at the museum help you when you take history in school?
Yes, I took, while working at the museum, I took 2 American history classes, and I think it really helped me there, and I think it'll continue to help me in my academic career.
Yes. I have definitely been more interested in older houses from the time I worked at the museum. I just think it's really interesting. So,
do you guys think you might study history when you get to college?
I think I would. Yeah, I'm definitely thinking about it.
I might. I'm thinking about it.
Well, that is good. And my last question for you all, was John Lewis a fun experience?
Yes, I had a great time. I would 100% do it again.
Yes, I loved it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ben and Charlotte.
As a follow-up, we also have our Director of Interpretation in here. Davis, you've been doing interpretation and living history for a pretty long time, too. Do you have any thoughts to share on engaging with history from an early age?
So I started in interpretation when I was 15 years old at Jamestown Settlement in Williamsburg, mostly because I needed something to do for the summer. My mom didn't want me around the house. So being that I was generally quite bored, went and looked into volunteering at Jamestown as something to do, and turned out I really enjoyed it. I ended up getting a part-time job there seasonally, getting paid to do that stuff. Got into, through those guys, the hobby side of living history as well. So I get paid to do it, and I don't get paid to go do it for fun as well. And however many years on, here we are.
So do you think that having those early experiences has really added a facet onto your professional life?
Yes, definitely. I definitely experienced a time when I look back on myself as a 15-year-old, I think, dear God, what was I doing? I definitely did a lot of really goofy stuff. If you had asked 15-year-old Davis about interpretation and historical accuracy and whatnot, you would have gotten very different answers than I would give you now. So I guess it gave me the ability to screw up in environments when it didn't really matter, right? I got to make those mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and get better. And then as well, there's just something to be said for the fact that when I graduated college, I already had, 6 years, 7 years or something like that under my belt of this. So it made it far easier to find employment in the field once I graduated college, already having that on my resume.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Interpreters engage with visitors in different ways. We have the traditional visitor, people who are interested and make the choice to come to visit the museums. But we also have field trips of students from preschool to college. We also get special interest groups, amateur historians interested in a specific aspect of the past. And we also provide outreaches where we bring some of the museum activities to other locations, like a school that is too far away to send students on a day trip.
Waking up at 4 to put your stays on and then sit in the van for 3 or 4 hours really puts some perspective on how grateful I am to have modern clothes. But very true, we as interpreters do have to engage those categories differently because there's a different purpose behind each of those. We'll turn it over to some other interpreters to answer, including our Director of Education.
Hi, I'm Andrew Richardson, the Education Director at the Frontier Culture Museum. I've worked here for 13 years. I began as a costume interpreter conducting numerous programs, primarily starting with our English farm, our West African, our settlement, and over time, just about all of them except for blacksmithing, which I'm not very good at. Now, what I do for as the education director is coordinate with schools to set up programs ranging from field trips and outreach programs to now what we're going to try with virtual programs. I've also set up numerous community event programs, homeschool days, and civic groups, community groups, and they're all different audiences and they're all looking for something different. And one of the nice things about this museum is it has a lot to offer, and we have a very talented staff who can take an idea and run with it and create a custom program to meet the very specific needs of our visitors.
Hello, this is Zach. I'm an interpreter here with the Frontier Culture Museum. One of the main things I like to keep in mind when dealing with children is, first and foremost, to keep it educational. And it's very important to keep things simplified and clearly culturally relevant. It's easy as interpreters, being history lovers that we are, we can get off on different paths and rants, if you will. But with the kids, you have to understand that they are coming at it from a very elementary standpoint. So for a young audience or school groups, I try and steer away from spur-of-the-moment commentary or opinions. That has its place after your main presentation has been done, interpretation. I often get into that with adults if we're getting along in a conversation, really diving deep into a subject. It's fun to, throw in opinions, things like that. You don't want to synthesize too much with children. Mixing things up too much can it can remove their focus from your main objective or your topic you're on. Pretty much stick to bullet points, big dates, big events, and characters that tie your lesson together. I personally do a lot of music here, so I like to keep things fun, popular songs they might know, whether they're just melodies or actual songs, lyrics, or poems put to music. With instruments, I like to talk about the properties themselves of the instrument, the violin, what parts go on a violin, guitar, banjo, a drum, etc. So that's something that kids always find interesting, and most of the time, the kids, depending on what age group you're dealing with, they're going to know a little bit about what you're talking about, and that tends to get them interested. If you're not coming with too much of an obscure subject or object, they like to dive in and answer questions. And violin's a good example. 95% of children, when I hold up a violin, they know what it is. Now, they might not know that there's 80 plus pieces to a violin. I don't go through all of that, but I talk about what the strings would have been made of historically, the bow, the type of wood they would have used, how long it might have taken a luthier to make a violin historically, and things like that. Outreaches, but most of the time it's to schools or libraries. So one thing I always keep in mind, if possible, always try to provide an interactive experience when you get there. Many outreaches I've been on have been foodways, music, or historical clothing. That's a perfect opportunity to let a kid or kids get up, bang some drums, try on some of the historical clothes, help with maybe some of the food preparation if we do that. So you don't, the problem with outreaches for the interpreter is you don't have the sites like here at the museum to assist you. So you need to rely on information, interaction, and question and answering. So for me, musical performance, I have to remember that the audience is probably going to be more comfortable where they're at their school or library. So it's okay to take a little more of a show approach, like you're entertaining them and you're trying to make their day happy. When people come to the museum, they're in a different environment. So you need to make them comfortable and get their orientation set with what's what,
what room they're in, how old the house is. But when they're at their school, they're already comfortable. They're already in their element, and they're on their home court. They have home court advantage. So you're in their house, so you're there to entertain. And also, just like with the last thing I said about the kids, keep it educational. That's the point. That's the whole reason why we're doing this. Keep it fun and keep it informative. Okay, interpreting to adults. This is a lot more involved. This is a lot more you have to keep in mind in many different ways. Adults can handle a lot more information. Adults also have a lot more information of their own. They also have a lot of opinions of their own. So it's not necessarily treading on thin ice, but you need to feel the room out and make sure you keep things, as always, educational and fun, and just respect other people's cultural backgrounds, where they're coming from, and how they might perceive what you're trying to convey to them. So with adults, you can get more complicated with topics and nuances. An example, rock music and blues music. That's a fun one because you can trace rock and blues back to ragtime music. Also, a derivative of that would be into the bluegrass and country world, but you go back farther, you're back into string band, what we would call old-time music. And before that, folk trad, or traditional music of different ethnic backgrounds. So you have African musical backgrounds, European musical backgrounds, and then you have even Western Europe, British backgrounds. So they all have a part to play in America's musical evolution. So it's a lot of fun for all across the board, children to adults. And historical interpretation is a lot of fun. It gives you a chance to reach out to people, meet different types of people from different backgrounds, and you all come together under one common interest, and that's learning about the past.
Hello, my name is Mark, and I've been an interpreter for a better part of 15 years now, between working here at the Frontier Culture Museum and other museums throughout the nation. So today I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about talking to different groups, and there are all different types of groups that come through to talk to us. But really one of the biggest differences for any group we're talking to is the age of the visitors. And basically, what kind of diction or vocabulary I'm going to use with those guests. If I'm talking to a family that has a 5-year-old, I'm going to bring down my voice. I'm going to actually change the timbre of my voice to be a little bit more joyful, a little bit happier with them, a little bit more compassionate. Or I could be talking about a very serious topic. I could be adding in a little bit of seriousness to my voice and the way I'm going to project it to everybody else. And I'm going to change the words that I'm going to use to try to make them age appropriate. I'm going to try to hit age appropriate vocabulary. Am I going to try to talk about colors with, say, a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old? Or am I going to talk about the legacy of different ethnic groups coming into the Shenandoah Valley? And I'm going to talk to an adult group about how those different groups came together to mingle and create a unique American frontier society. So that's really kind of the crux of talking to different groups, is seeing the group, finding the age, and if you are going to change your vocabulary, that doesn't necessarily mean I change the context and the information that I'm giving. Let's say I was giving a demonstration on defending the frontier during the French and Indian War. I'm not going to change what I'm talking about, but I might change about how I address the topics based on the age of my visit.
A significant part of living history is being in the correct dress of the period. This means a lot of research on fabric, fashion, and undergarments, shoes, and more. You tend to either love your costume or you hate it. Let's bring in some perspective on costuming at the Frontier Culture Museum.
Hi, my name is Travis. I'm an interpreter here at the Frontier Culture Museum. I've been doing vaguely professional interpretation for 2 years, and some form of living history, pretty much all my life. And costuming I find pretty important to interpretation. It's going to do a couple of things. One, provide a more immersive experience for the visitors and guests, and kind of give them a better look into what the daily life of someone from the past might have been. It's also going to provide a narrative tool showing the transitions and assimilations of cultures, or just providing something that's kind of thought-provoking and interesting, like portraying a European wearing breech clout and some other traditional Eastern Woodland Indians clothing, and kind of the conversation of why they would do that, and what that is showing as far as kind of progression of cultures.
Hello, I'm Gigi. I work here at the Frontier Culture Museum. I'm a costumed interpreter, as well as I do spend time in the costume shop itself, making and repairing costumes for everyone. How we are dressed is the first thing visitors see when they come to the museum. First impressions go a long way to set the stage for our visitors, particularly at our museum that spans 300 years of history. Food, clothing, and shelter are common to us all.
Hi, I'm Sam. I've been an interpreter for 7 years. For me, costuming is a vital interpretive tool and something that allows us to explore a variety of topics in a lot more depth. For me here at the museum, I'm one of the primary persons that works on the construction of male clothing or men's clothing, particularly with the 18th century. And that clothing can tell a story that, for us as interpreters, is vitally important. It can tell a person who you are, where you're from, and in large part what you're doing. There is a very great distinction between, say, military clothing of the 18th century and civilian clothing, but even amongst that civilian clothing, tremendous distinction between cultures, in that here at the museum, we do not clothe, say, our German farm in the same way that we clothe our Irish farm, because they were, even though both European cultures, vastly different in the 18th century. And by that same token, we can also use clothing to talk about how culture changes over time, particularly when you're looking about Virginians in the 18th century, those living here in the Valley of Virginia. Despite the fact that they might have come from places like Germany or Ireland, the environment that they're living in vastly changes how they choose to clothe themselves. And we see that particularly here in the Valley, where a variety of the men are adopting what was referred to in the period as Indian dress, being things like leggings, moccasins, and breech clouts, which normally would have been attributed to Eastern Woodland Indians. But these white European men decided we're a far better technology as far as clothing in North America. And by representing that here at the museum, it allows us to show cultural shifts and change to the visitor that otherwise would be very, very difficult to try to explain. So for me, I think clothing is sort of a vital part of what we do, in that it allows us to have another tool in our tool belt to give the visitor a more well-rounded experience.
I have been an interpreter for over 30 years, and I've worn all sorts of costumes, and I can tell you, I find the costumes to be very, very comfortable. They're very baggy, you're tied in, you can move around a lot, and I find it easy to do all the work that we do, even if it's hard physical work.
And that is because you are male, Alex, because female costuming is entirely different. We are strapped into stays, we have at least 2 petticoats, multiple layers of jackets and aprons, everything tied around your waist. The female silhouette changes through time, so all the undergarments change, what different shapes you're being put into, what kind of contortions your body's being forced into by all of these tied-on objects. And by the end of the day, the best thing is taking off your stays.
Here's a final question that might help listeners understand why we do what we do. What do you get out of interpretation?
This one is especially pertinent for me. As an archaeologist, I take every day on site as a chance for experimental archaeology. I can get a better feel for what should be on a site in a specific period and make note of how I'm using reproduction artifacts to do daily activities. And honestly, when I break something through using it, that's valuable data too. A lot of the archaeological record is deposited through purposeful discarding of broken items, so knowing firsthand how something broke and what it looked like before I broke it can add a really interesting facet into finding, say, half a pie plate. Knowing how I can easily crack a ceramic dish by having to heat too quickly can help me identify that fracture pattern.
The one thing I've learned after doing interpretation pretty much, it seems, for almost all my life, is when you do things the way they did it in the past, it's really difficult. It's really hard work. And I think the biggest thing I got is an appreciation about how easy life is and how good overall life is today. Even though people don't believe it, we really have it good right now.
Hi there, I'm Misty Furr. I have been an interpreter going on 21 years now, 21 years in January. What do I get out of interpretation? First of all, I get joy out of being able to teach people about the past, especially about Eastern woodland cultures, which is my passion. I also get to discover with visitors as I'm teaching them and doing research for the sites that I interpret. I do get a little rage sometimes, but that's not directed at anyone in particular, visitor-wise. It's just I don't believe that we teach American history as well as we should. And I also get to be a lifelong learner.
Hi, I'm Michaela, and I've been at the Frontier Culture Museum for almost 5 years. And interpretation, what I've gotten out of interpretation working at the Frontier Culture Museum is that it's completely changed my viewpoints. When I first came to the museum, I was fairly naive and innocent in a lot of my thought processes, and the museum really challenged me on all fronts. And it also equipped me with a lot more knowledge and led me to become an advocate for historically marginalized people.
Well, thanks to all the interpreters who joined us in this episode. Hopefully you have a better understanding of what interpretation is and what interpreters bring to a living history museum like the Frontier Culture Museum. We hope you enjoyed Banjo Strings and Drinking Gourds. We bring you historical episodes twice a month. You can check out the Frontier Culture Museum online at frontiermuseum.org, on Facebook and Instagram. You will find background on all the farms at the museum, information on upcoming events, and so much more.
If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please consider visiting the website and clicking the donate button. Donations to the American Frontier Culture Foundation support programs like field trips, summer camp, and special events. We'd greatly appreciate it. See you next time.